This is the moment we've been waiting for. A time in human history where exponential technologies have rendered the world more virtually connected, more empowered, and more informed than ever before. Yet, we're still suffering a lot. So, how do we make the most of our modern tools to amplify and connect with what truly matters? To light the way, I've asked some friends to join us around the proverbial fire to share stories of discovering their purpose hidden within life's winding path and to explore the future we really want. Let's meet where community, technology, and ancient wisdom converge. Today, we're here with Dylan Donkin, one of my dearest friends from university, where we both pursued degrees in cultural anthropology. When we weren't learning about global cultures, singing 60s folk music, or eating Dylan's legendary raw berry pie, we would often talk about the future. 12 years ago, he was excited about the potential of self-driving vehicles and how technology like virtual reality would make it possible for people to live and work more comfortably outside of cities, hopefully bringing us closer to nature. Dylan is one of those cool nerds who, after getting a double master's from USC and London School of Economics, worked at Marvel, designed product for GoPro, and is now helping shape our emerging, technically enhanced reality as a UX designer at Google. I invited Dylan to share with us today because I believe his unique blend of optimism, realism, and technical savvy will help ground me, and hopefully us, in the groundless space of VR and augmented reality. It's time we have a little talk about what we thought today would be like, how it really is, and where he hopes we go from here. We'll talk about the light and dark sides of the psyche-reshaping potential of gaming and remote work, the healing and empathy-boosting powers of VR, and the visceral risks of the techy-future we are all a part of, whether we like it, get it, or don't. We'll explore the edges while having fun and keeping close to what matters most. Dylan Donkin, you rock. I love you. Welcome.
Wow! Thank you. What an amazing intro. That's fantastic. I love you. Great to chat with you. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. And what do you want to talk about?
If Google were an animal, which animal would it be? What animal would Google be?
It'd be an elephant. Okay, it'd be an elephant, no question.
Why?
Because it doesn't forget. It has a lot of information it can store in its noggin. It's also monolithic, I guess. It's a way, it's a mammoth company. But it's an herbivore. It's not a carnivore, because there's a lot of things that I think they're doing that are very positive in the world. I don't feel like they're they're not as destructive as other companies. I feel like they're doing things like allowing people in developing countries to have access to the world's information. I mean, it's pretty cool.
If you were to put it into a few words, Dylan, what are you a stand for in this world?
Equality. All equality, justice, and love. And not being an asshole, whatever that's called. If that could be encapsulated into one word.
Kind,
sure.
or is it? It's more than
kindness.
That?
No, I think kindness is, it's a little underrated, actually. I think we should use that word more often. Yeah, empathy. Being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. I'm a big believer in that, big proponent of that. Hope more of that's the world. I always want to try to do more of it. I never feel like I'm doing enough of it. Every time I feel like I'm not. And then I need to be more empathetic. That's definitely something I stand for.
When I hear you say that, empathy, I think this is reminding me of a time I think we were sitting in your car looking out over a field in Northern California. We'd visited your brother up north, and we were talking about self-driving vehicles in the future. And
Mm.
I've always had a sort of resistance, and I was asking for your help to sort of explore that and be like, why do I feel so much resistance to this future of self-driving cars and VR? And I remember saying, but if we have VR meetings, we're not going to be able to smell each other, touch each other, feel the actual vibration of the other being in the room near us. However, you made this gorgeous case that I remember about the ability of VR to increase empathy. And I'm curious if you might share with us a little bit about that example of putting people in others' shoes, perhaps especially those from the privileged Western world, into those who have experienced some of the perils of war, do you remember this?
Oh yeah. There's a great what was it? The New York Times. I remember they did this whole thing where they had a few different of these videos from different places. One was a food drop off zone in
Is it Syria?
a country. No, it was the Sudan. It was in Africa. But you saw this, like, that they're dropping these big bundles of food, and these people are all coming up, running up and grabbing it. And there's a 360 camera, this video recording in 360 this experience that you can, be with them and be in this sort of, not really be in this experience, but to be immersed in this experience visually. And we're visual creatures, and we're very, it unlocked something for me. I'd never seen a food drop. Like, I didn't really just see the masses and all around you, all running for it. The humanity of that doesn't quite come across in a little rectangular screen that you watch on your computer. So seeing it in immersive virtual reality sort of format was really eye-opening. Another one was yes, there was a Syrian refugee.
The goggles, VR goggles, so that
Yeah.
you could actually look around as if you were in that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's something that is heart unlocking when you're seeing there was another one where it was a Ukrainian village that was bombed out, that all the school was bombed out, and the kids are walking around the rubble picking up little scraps and stuff, and you look around like, oh my God, the whole school is just devastated. And again, the enormity of this horrible crisis that they're going under becomes much more readily, viscerally understood than it would have been otherwise without VR, I think. But that was a few years ago. It's since we had that conversation, VR has kind of stalled. Technologically, it's continuing to evolve and get better, but as far as like cultural kind of adoption of it, it's kind of stalled. But what's interesting is that now we are in a situation where people have to be in these quarantined areas, and they really want community. And oddly enough, in a way, I feel like VR we could provide them now with the community they can't feel in a physical environment because they can't be around in a physical environment. So there are abilities for people to create these cyber universes that are, these new disembodied environments that have no geography that anyone could be a part of. Doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter what you look like, because your face can look like a giant cheeseburger, whatever it is, or it could be whatever you want. And this is a very freeing thing. This also, I think, opens up people to the possibility of making connections they might not have otherwise had, being constrained by the environmental, the biological. I mean, just by being, culturally looking different than someone else, maybe you would feel less, more reticent to like talk to them if they, if they're this scary, different looking person. But if everyone looks like whatever they want, kind
Meaning
of doesn't.
Avatar?
Yeah, I mean, or the, what's the VR movie that everybody always references? I didn't like it very much, to be honest, but I thought it does a good job of kind of showing. Yeah, Ready Player One.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's a little, it's a little, I don't feel like VR is ever going to be a situation where like, where it feels like you're going to die in a situation. I mean, to be honest, I have been in a situation where I felt like I was going to die in VR, but only in a very subconscious kind of way. I mean, I knew consciously that I was in my space, but although it's interesting, that does kind of bring up an interesting phenomenon that I did notice after playing VR. So I'm a big VR person. I have spent hours in VR environments at a time, and what's interesting is after spending hours in these VR environments where you can teleport around, like you have to press a button, you can just teleport to wherever you are. A lot of VR games have this way of transporting yourself around, whatever. And so when I'm walking around town, sometimes I feel like I'm expecting to be able to transport myself, and then just that little sliver of like feeling of like disembodiment and like disassociation with reality kind of made me think, I wonder if in the future when people are doing this for like 10 hours at a time, if they're going to feel like, not to get too, like gloomy, but like I could see someone just like thinking they can walk through cars or, going through doing, impossible feats that they're used to be able to doing in these virtual environments. There could be an effect to that. I think that could totally happen in the future.
Well, okay. You have taken us into a really rich space because the implications of that are pretty wide. So one is, I could imagine that through VR, it's reminding me as I'm listening to you, for anyone who's been on a sailboat before, and you've like been on a sailboat for a few days, like I sailed to Catalina.
Good analogy.
And you're like, at first you're like, ugh, I'm a little seasick and like, this is intense. And then you're like, I wonder what it's going to be like to get onto land. And then you finally get back on land and it's the weirdest feeling, like everything's too calm,
yes,
too grounded, too
normal.
Quiet. Like it's like too normal. And so it also can remind me very separately of psychedelic drugs. I haven't done a ton of psychedelic drugs, but I have used mushrooms. And I know the difference of saying, like, okay, after being in an experience under the influence of psilocybin, which frankly, like the very first time I took psilocybin, this was not a trippy experience. This was like a pretty profound spiritual initiatory experience with two of my best girlfriends right after my parents were separating. Like my mom had left this apartment 2 days prior, or the day before. I was about to turn 15 and I was trying to process this life-shattering change. And I took one mushroom. This, for anyone who has experimented with those, that's not a lot. And so did my friends. We each took one mushroom, but it must have been a fresh mushroom because the experience, we stayed in the incubator of my mother's old room all night long and basically went through a primordial evolution where we looked at the same windows right here, these windows, the same trees, and it looked like Jurassic Park. But the feeling of love in our hearts was so extraordinary and palpable that the experience of that one night stayed with me in a therapeutic sense for months after, because I had touched a feeling of love I hadn't known before that was unconditional.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so it created a new pathway, a new experience of reality that wasn't there before. And so as I'm hearing you talk about VR and the empathy building experience of putting oneself in different shoes, it reminds me also of basically these novel experiences that are brain changing and chemistry shifting because of that change. And so psilocybin is used to help treat trauma, and it is used by therapists who are practicing to do that. I could imagine VR becoming an interesting potential way of, like, it sounds like an imagination facilitator.
Absolutely. It can definitely, it can not only, I think, cure people of a lot of fears. Like there's a game where you're like, it's called Jet Island, and you've got like it's kind of like you're the Silver Surfer. You've got a surfboard that can fly around the air. I am deathly afraid of heights. Deathly afraid of heights. I can't go on like a gondola without like, getting, heart palpitations. So I put this on at first and I'm terrified. I'm like, whoa, I should fly thousands of feet around the air. Are you kidding me? And then, but I'm also exhilarated. It's also incredibly adrenalizing. And so I start doing it. And after a while, I get my virtual VR legs in this experience. And I become less and less fearful of this experience. And I don't know, like I got on a ladder after doing that for a while and getting some stuff out of my parents' loft and felt like I went all the way to the top of the ladder, didn't think about it. I felt like it did actually help me, and which I thought was really interesting. There's also an app called Audience, I think Virtual Audience, where it's like you can give a speech in front of a fake audience, and they all are staring at you wherever you go, like looking at you, and you have to go up to the podium.
In my life in Paris, we use that. I'm a meditation coach, and so I have brought people in preparing for a TEDx talk, put on the VR goggles, those who have fear of public speaking, which is most people in the world.
Most people, right?
And exactly what you're saying. You can facilitate, you can, what's the word? You can
synthesize the...
you can simulate experiences from you can take them through the spectrum of like, okay, you've got a neutral audience, then you can change in the audience VR reality space you're talking about, make the audience very mean.
Oh, can you? I didn't try that. That's great.
You can activate their fears. You can get their adrenaline up in the worst case scenario and help them test drive through that worst case scenario.
Yes.
That is literally the same technology that the hypnotherapist used with me when helping me get over my fear of the dentist.
Really?
Basically going through, well, actually she used the opposite. She went through the best case scenario to help lower my fear response.
Using it like imagery of like a best case scenario?
Deep relaxation, the VR of the mind, which we were all born with, our imagination.
Right.
And
VR of the
then
mind.
helped guide me through. In nonviolent communication, they say that if there's an unmet need, there's a conflict. And so it's about understanding the need inside. And so honestly, you're kind of blowing my mind right now, because I really still don't have much interest in VR, even after using it with my clients.
Yeah.
But hearing you talk about it that way, I'm like, okay, I think I will drive my Prius up to your house and be like, okay, hook me up.
Gotta strap in there. Check it out.
No.
Yeah.
I remember going to the bottom of the ocean with you the last time I was in San Francisco.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, there's lots of fun ones. There's a time machine one. Oh, it's going to be fun. One more thing that I thought was really fascinating was I've been doing work with people that are disabled, that have nerve damage issues in their legs. There's this guy that they've been doing VR therapy where they hook him up into a harness and his legs are kind of left dangling, and he envisions, he's looking at a VR application of like him walking around in the VR application, and then thinking about, actually walking and actually moving his legs, and the nerve endings have been regrowing more quickly as a result of the VR. That was like an interesting new study that's being done on that. So there's something about the mind-body connection, and VR could potentially extend and amplify those things that maybe you could otherwise you wouldn't be able to do without. That could, regrowing nerves with our minds. I mean, that might be a little, out there, but people are trying it out, and it's having good results. So.
It does not sound out there to me, and it sounds quite extraordinary. You're bringing up something that's a little bit related but different here, and that is, so Dylan, as someone who works in technology, I imagine you've spent a good amount of time at a desk. Is that right?
Yeah.
And in front of a computer. A few hours, maybe. Yes. I want to ask you, especially as, I've been listening to Peter Diamandis's "The Future is Faster Than You Think." And frankly, it dizzies me. I get anxious as I listen to it. And I'm thinking back to, thinking fast and slow, I'm trying to imagine, how can we live fast and slow? Because if so much of our pleasure in life comes from the little things and comes from the places where we've lost track of time, and we're not optimizing for shit. All we're optimizing for is pleasure and relaxation or leisure or what have you. I want to ask you, how do you balance loving and working in technology along with the human body connection?
Yeah, great question. Jeez. Not very well. I mean, I wish I could do a better job of it. Um, you know, standing desks are, you know, they help. I mean, we're talking about just the body issues of sitting, you know, and being and doing information work where you're using a computer, and you know, you're indoors, not being out in the sun and sitting long periods of time, maybe not eating very well either. I mean, that's not good. How do you balance that out? I think you gotta take breaks. You know, it's interesting. We've been doing meetings lately with my team where we've been keeping it to 25 minutes instead of 30 minutes, 15 minutes instead of an hour, and getting those little 10-minute breaks, 5-minute breaks between meetings, just to get up, give everybody a chance to get up and go walk around. Because a lot of times, especially in remote world, it's like you can just be sitting all day long looking at the computer, not moving at all, other than going to the bathroom. Hopefully you'll get up for that. And then eventually, you know, you might, you know, after 8 hours, stand up, and it's just, you don't want to do that. So I think, and I think this is something that more and more companies and people in general are just kind of paying attention to more, is this getting the joy of getting out of technology, because it's so all encompassing now, it seems to be, at least in my neck of the woods. And so now I think people want to have this downtime. I think we all instinctively know we need it. I think we all instinctively know that we can't be on screen so much, but we abuse it because we're addicted. So, and then work encourages it, you know, so there's that too, you know, and then if it turns out that you're interested in any kind of, you know, recording art or film art on this, you're doing on top of that, that's some more screen time. So everything becomes more, all things that people would otherwise do without screens are becoming activities they do with screens. So getting more and more screen time in our lives, there has to be a release, a valve release. And I think what's going to really help, you know, how I envision my future with technology is being, living in a place that has nature, and being able to do that because of the technology. It's because of my technology job that I can go move somewhere far away from cities and smog and pollution, away from traffic, and I can go somewhere and live in the Ozarks or in the Blue Mountains of Kentucky, and have one foot in a beautiful bucolic environment in you know, American, you know, raw wilderness, and then I can put on my VR goggles and my headphones and my laptop, my internet connection, and I can, you know, work at a Fortune 500 company or do whatever. I mean, whatever, you know, if that's what you want to do, you know, or whatever you're doing, whatever, you know, I think more and more jobs are going to be doing that. More and more, there'll be more opportunities to do that. And so I think of technology as a vehicle to get me to that place, because I wouldn't have been able to get there had I not have that technology job. You know what I mean? So in a funny way, I think that the more technology is giving us the opportunities to be more connected to nature. And ultimately, where I see a lot of people's dreams, at least, being very similar to mine, I think, in the future, where they're going to be craving this natural world because they're so ensconced in the virtual. So as a result, I think you're going to see, and also as a result of, you know, these technological hubs are, you know, very expensive housing over there. So all these workers that want to have the old school American dream of having a home with, and they can, that's have some space and have a family. That's not really possible right now in a lot of these places. So people are going to be moving to these other places to be able to give them that, but then still work for these same companies virtually. I don't see that being a bad thing. I think that could be pretty nice. It could also do incredible wonders for the cultural separation that we've been feeling and experiencing over the last few years between this sort of the rural culture and the urban suburban. That divide has been so stark lately. It's been almost like living in completely different universes. And a lot of that is because I think people don't know a lot of people in either of those universes. I mean, I have an idea of what people are like in Wyoming, but I don't go to Wyoming. I don't know what they actually are doing on the weekends. And I mean, maybe they're nice people. I mean, I'm sure a lot of them are. There's this sort of, but do you see what I'm saying? Like I'm already kind of voicing my prejudice against these.
Are you saying that this could be culturally revolutionary because you'll be engaging with people from places you wouldn't have otherwise thanks to technology?
Yes, that, and hipsters are going to move to Iowa. And people, you know what I mean? Like people are going to be, beardies that live in the Mission who want to eventually be able to own a home one day, aren't going to be able to do it in the Bay Area. I think they're going to be going to places and starting their own kind of scenes over there. How hipster is that, right? It's nothing more hipster than like, hey, I started out hanging out in Des Moines before anyone else knew it was cool. I wouldn't be surprised. Meanwhile, what does that do to the landscape over there when all of a sudden people are, meeting in real life? These people are having more, I would think, more understanding, because that always creates more understanding, right?
Right.
Multicultural experiences creates more understanding. It usually does. I mean, it's usually the homogeneity that creates a lot of the prejudice and a lot of the fear of the other. But once everybody is all part of the same, once you have people from different areas all coming together. But now you mentioned a really interesting point, which was also the equalizing power of the virtual world, which I also think is going to change things, because what you're already seeing now, which I think is one of the coolest things, is a little kid growing up in Indiana with a with a culture he doesn't agree with or want to be a part of, feels like a person, an island unto themselves, the loneliness that person feels. Now there's somebody else that's, feeling that same way in the Middle East, doesn't want to go with the whatever, the specific area, fill in the blank. You get the idea. Different places, people all over the world feeling outcasts, people that might have been put on really bad paths in their life because of that feeling. They could find community in the virtual. Also, again, I was saying before, you can create experiences and environments where it's less and less important what you look like and where you're from. And, what you are like biologically, it becomes less important. We are becoming disembodied more and more. And I think that's a good thing, because our bodies tend to weigh us down a lot of the time when it comes to prejudices and fear, fear of the other. Again, what a great environment. I mean, to be in, what a fearless environment that is the virtual, where you don't have to worry about anybody. You actually could get, I think what actually could happen, how people have, you ever been in like a flame war? Like in a comment section on like a site, someone or read comments and seen people blow up at each other,
Sure.
I could imagine in the future, those people could actually challenge each other to a duel in a virtual world, and they could fight each other in the octagon. You know what I mean? Like, why not? Who cares? It's a virtual experience. You can get out your aggressions. You can get out all of these issues that you would, in the real world would be horrible. There's a game called Drunken Bar Fight. I think I showed it to you, right? Did we play Drunken Bar Fight?
No, I didn't. I did not play that.
Well, have you ever wanted to be secretly in the middle of a drunken bar fight, where people are throwing chairs on each other. You ever seen like in the Old West?
Yeah.
I mean, in case you ever wondered what I was like, you can experience that. Get out the aggression. I don't think, a lot of people think that video games causes people to do violent stuff, but I've always felt it's a way to take out bad energy and put it into a video game rather than in real life.
Well, I think what you're calling out here, and there are a few things you've brought up that are really important. One is, again, it's a tool, and you're a very loving, positive, caring person. And so the way you're going to use it is one way. And yes, maybe you're like, I'm going to get out my aggression so I don't go hurt someone out there. And maybe someone else is experiencing it more like you are, with getting over fear of height. Maybe they're actually immersing themselves in a world where that is possible, and they start actually expressing themselves the way that because what's important here, right? There are three key pieces to this conversation that I'm focused on. There's technology, there's community, and there's indigenous wisdom. And what is the indigenous wisdom piece about? This encompasses everything. For me, I'm using this quite broadly to cover mindfulness, spirituality, our connection with the earth. The earth is kind of, to me, it's like a metaphor of our collective body. And so when I hear about technology helping us disembody, to me, it brings into place, this is just me. I go to Matrix. I go to basically a place where the only actually, where I go a little bit is what you showed me many years ago. What is it? Fantastic Planet.
Oh yeah, right.
And I'm going to use yoga terms now. I did this in a different episode, but talking about our energy chakra centers. Technology is like the incredible use, also almost exploitation of the crown chakra. It is like we are existing here, but frankly, I'm going to even move my screen.
Do it.
This is where we're born. This creates life. Mm-hmm. This is the place that connects us to each other. This is the empathy center. This is an extension of this. This whole body, and for those who are listening and not watching, I basically just pointed to the center of our reproductive space, our root chakra, our stomach, our solar plexus, our heart, our hands, and this whole vehicle that we were born with, I dare say for a reason. Perhaps we evolved past using it. That's possible. We're getting into a zone that's necessary, which is, what are the dangers of going too far in one direction without potentially bringing in the wisdom of this body? And I'm thinking about you too, Dylan, 10 years ago at your Zen Buddhist table, sipping green tea, in lotus position. There's also connection, not using VR as an external device, but connecting through what we were already given. And so my question to you, and this is a personal one, is and I'd make it personal because I think that's the only way we genuinely learn when we listen to each other, is through someone being vulnerable enough to take it home to themselves. So I'm asking here, this is sort of that let's go to the top of the ladder moment. What do you avoid when you disembody, or when it's in the maybe that's the stronger word, but what can get avoided? What gets missed if we go too far, or perhaps if you stay too long at your desk or too long in goggles? Is there something that goes missing? Is there something that gets neglected?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's like, if you go through a spat of time where you don't exercise, and then all of a sudden you exercise, you're like, holy crap, I feel so much better. My mood is so much better. I feel so much more centered. I completely agree with what you said. I don't disagree at all. I would say yes, going by your terminology, the crown chakra, the overuse of the crown chakra in the technological and the virtual is inevitable because you don't need your body. You don't need your body. You're a body pilot that doesn't need a body at that point, and you pilot other, disembodied virtual spaces. And I've already mentioned the benefits of that potentially, but and I think you've also mentioned, which I think makes sense, there's also a lot of problems with that. And I think a big one is forgetting your body, forgetting what you're doing. Just like anytime you're preoccupied with something, you're completely fascinated with something, and you'll spend hours on like a creative project. I think the similar thing happens when you can be in a video game, or wherever, or you're like I said, you're working from home, and you're working on a project for work, and you're not listening to your body. And again, this is something that I think it's becoming a bigger and bigger movement. I think it's only going to get bigger, of JOMO, of the joy of missing out, the joy of not. This is that's a Google term. So that's a drink the Kool-Aid moment, having to bring that into the conversation. But yeah, it's true. I think that's something people are craving now, and they're going to crave it more. And that's their body communicating to them, saying, get in touch with me. Don't forget about me. Because I'm your pal. You need me. We need each other. And so I think that can't end, and I don't think it will end. I really don't. I think it's super important. It's only going to get more important that people are checking back in with themselves physically, and I think they are. And by the way, you could also do that in virtual reality. There are 24-Hour Fitness just spent millions of dollars on a virtual reality system that they're working on for people to do virtual gyms. Wow. And I'm sure there's all kinds of interesting ways you can physicalize in the virtual world, that you can actually bring your body with you into the virtual world. So as I've talked about a lot of disembodied places, but I think there are also going to be embodied, physical embodiment experiences. Mm-hmm. But that just getting away from the technology, the importance of putting down the laptop, mm-hmm. taking off the goggles, and going outside and taking a walk is, I don't see that going away. I think only people are going to be craving that more. And I think in the future, they're going to be able to do that more, because again, they're going to be able to, if this information economy continues to explode the way it has been, it's probably going to be more opportunities for people to be living in remote locations and bring the technology with them into these remote locations so that they can experience these places they wouldn't have been able to otherwise experience.
Yes
in the physical world again. But yeah, it's got to be a balance. Absolutely.
And I asked this as well because I've been spending some time in the space of data and ethics recently. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking as well about our younger generations, our future children, how we parent in the world that we are creating.
Stand up for what you believe in, and it sounds cliche, but like if you believe in something, politically, you should go out and campaign for them, and don't just vote for them if you believe in it, because if you do that, there's a good chance a lot of other people will, find out about it. If everybody is one of those things where, I think I want to make people feel less powerless. I think, I hope I have shown that, been able to do that through artistic works so far, but I'd love to be able to do that in more substantial ways. So hopefully in 10 years, this conversation will be prophetic, and there will actually have been things that will have been done in that regard. There's this feeling of powerlessness, I think, that people feel in mass, that I feel particularly passionate about changing people's perceptions of. Because if we all felt the same way and all exclaimed at the same time, we all feel helpless. What can we do? This big ocean of people all saying, we all feel so helpless. What can we do? Not thinking about the opportunities that they have to form a wave, to change things, to create things, to pave a new path in their society, but they feel powerless. So I guess am I talking about populism? I guess to a certain extent, but hopefully done in a way that's positive. There's a lot of negative populism, but I think the idea that we can come together and that again, we can do that for potentially egalitarian efforts, societally, socially.
What keeps me up at night, so to speak, luckily I'm sleeping well these days. But I have had times where I haven't, and there have been the things that keep me up or have been harm to the planet. I was living between two countries basically for multiple years. And so I have flown many thousands of miles, like probably at this point, hundreds of thousands of miles of jet fuel for one human being. And like our planet is not equipped to take that kind of wear and tear. And we're seeing it in the degradation of our beautiful earth. And so this is something that the amount of joy I get out of seeing newborn leaves grow when I've cut a plant in my house is like, imagine what this earth looked like 100 years ago, the change we've seen in just the last couple of decades. So something that really sits with me and that I feel very grateful for, at least in this pause of a moment with the pandemic, is the amount of bird activity I'm hearing and seeing in the morning. That quells a worry in my heart, and just to see the resilience and bounce back of this planet. Another thing that can concern me is living in France. I had the taste of what it's like to live in a social system that cares for the well-being of each citizen.
I wish I knew what that was like. Sounds pretty cool.
It is exquisite. It is exquisite. And it is something that brings such dignity, such a sense of security, and even a mutual love for country and feeling loved by country. And this country, the United States of America, was founded upon an incredible spirit of discovery and embarking into the new. And frankly, it is the spirit that fuels so much innovation, which is like the thrusting lifeblood of the Silicon Valley culture and so many things that affect the world. However, we didn't necessarily build a system that thinks in long term. We think
Totally
about tomorrow.
Right.
And who gives a shit after tomorrow? It'll be fun. And like, okay, but how about
it's a disruptor society. It's all about disrupting. It's not about, there's a very destructive element of that. It's not very constructive. It's about, I think of what Lyft did to all the taxi drivers and taxi cabs. And,
amen. Fire is destructive. So there's like, again, it's the duality. There's the life and death in all of it. And so how do we, this is my inquiry. This is why this conversation is so beautiful and important to me, is talking to people who think differently than I do, who live different lives than I do, and hopefully can start waking up the brains in others to experience, vicariously what it's like to be someone who works at Google. How do you think? Okay, now I'm going to go talk to someone who spends their life in nature. How do they think? Really get different perspectives and see how they weave together. To help wrap us up, I want to ask, thanks. I like it. Lastly, if you could blink your eyes and magically there would be a paradigm shift or a change in belief or practice, something across all organizations, all groups and organizations around the world, what would that shift or change be when you opened your eyes? What would you see? What would be different?
If I could change one thing, wisdom, and I don't mean necessarily wisdom like numbers or knowledge. We got plenty of that, but I think the wisdom to know by understanding all of the people that are affected by what they're doing. So, yeah, I guess more empathy. If I have to choose one thing to be different, if everyone was a little bit more thoughtful of everyone else. I mean, I'm a lefty, so I kind of think I have ideals like that. We're all in this together, and there are big problems that can only be solved by everybody coming together. So it's absolutely what needs to happen is we need to stop all the fighting, put down the guns, start figuring this shit out so we can continue. And if we don't, that's not good. We know where we're headed. I feel environmentally, I mean, what keeps me up is the backwards, the backwater of a lot of the intellectual backwater, I guess. I don't know what you can say, like people not thinking about the future enough, not thinking about where things are going to be in a few decades enough. Not, instead just things are just fine. There's this, that famous meme of the little dog in the house that's on fire, and he's got like a sort of a glazed look on his face, and he's just a big smile. And he said, "Everything's fine. This is totally fine." Like that's what I think of. Like that's what keeps me up at night. That kind of mentality. It's this sort of there's a fear I think that causes that for people, that paralyzes them about the future. They don't like the idea of. I mean, just right now there's this whole thing with to bring it back into the pandemic. The meat industries are facing big problems right now. Tyson, they're not. People are getting sick online. They could potentially contaminating the meat. So there's a lot of fear right now. People don't want to be eating this meat, and people are turning to vegan options a lot more. Vegan sales are up, I think 335%, something like that, since last quarter. Like it's insane how much more people are now open to these other ways of subsisting without killing animals. I think in the future people are gonna be really like disdain, like they're gonna look on the, I think, previous cultures with a lot of like, like why are you eating all those animals for? You didn't need to. You had all the other stuff you could eat, and it's going to seem like kind of crazy to us, but I think there's going to be animal rights are going to be on a whole other level in the future. I think we could potentially even see, maybe it would take 100 years. I don't know, maybe 200 years, but I think we'll get there to where animals have almost as much rights as human beings. And again, this all comes from empathy, more and more understanding of the other. If we all become one tribe, then what becomes the other? Maybe the other animals, maybe the aliens. Did you hear about the UFOs the UFO info they just dropped, the government?
What? No.
Oh, you got to see this. The military had shot this video, these 3 different videos over a few years. I think since like 2004 was the first one. They released it last week officially. And the government says, yeah, this is real. We know what the hell these things are. And then these crafts, or maybe they're not crafts, who knows? They could be animals living in the stratosphere, flying around, 1,000 miles an hour and stopping on a dime and then disappearing because they're accelerating so fast that they just disappear. Like this is all, I'll send you the video. It's incredible. And there has got to be an explanation for this, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be aliens either. It could be, maybe it is, secret technology that a country is using, which was like, that to me seems even crazier than aliens. Like, what the hell? They're keeping this like crazy technology. Like, how come Google doesn't know about this? So I don't know. I feel like to me, it feels like even more crazy that like it would be that. I almost feel like aliens is less, or maybe it is like creatures that are living. There's just these space creatures that don't breathe oxygen, that have this whole other way of living. Maybe they're interdimensional beings. Who knows? Maybe they're, ourselves in the future coming to visit and see what life was like back in the day. Who knows? It's whatever it is, there's something out there, and it's freaky. And it's a whole nother element that I didn't, we probably should have a whole nother conversation about. But that's like, what does that mean? Like, what does this mean? Like, and is this like one of the things where, in a few years, are we actually going to finally have like non-fuzzy images of these little blips on the screen? Like we have like with modern photographic technology, going to be able to like have infinite zoom, and we could just like finally see what these things are up close. I don't know. I'm totally rambling right now, but that's just like, it's so much fun stuff to talk about with you guys.
Oh man, amazing.
I hope so.
There's like so many
I hope
other
there's something interesting.
very, very interesting. Can I ask a super simple question? See if it's simple. If and when there's conflict at work, have you ever had a conflict at work?
Yes.
How did you resolve it? In a few words, like what happened to resolve it?
Communication. It's always better to talk to the person and talk to the person directly, and to also get away from other people and just have a one-on-one.
How did you learn to communicate? Did you like read a book, or is there like an example of someone who communicates in a way that actually?
No, I was in a band. I was in a band for years, lots of bands. You got to learn how to communicate or your band doesn't blows up, right? It's very similar.
Like polyamorous marriage.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And you have to be able to, and I wasn't very good at it, but I learned a lot doing that. And I think, especially when it comes to creative work, which I do technology work, but it's creative technology work. And so people can get really hung up on their creations, and egos can get really big too, especially when they're really good, designers, and you want to, you want to honor the work they do, and you don't want to insult them. And so you want to be respectful, and you want to be positive and loving, and just be real. I mean, and it also, like, don't bullshit. Like, what's the problem? Like, one thing is, a lot of times people are almost too nice in the tech sector, I think, as a result of this not wanting to trigger people. What, you don't like my idea? People have gotten used to, like, having to massage language and communication in a way that doesn't feel like, I'm coming down on somebody. And that's a good thing. But at the same time, you don't get to the point where you're losing the actual, not the data that you're trying to transmit to the person, which is, that needs to be different. This needs to be, whatever it is, like, in a way that, so you got to be able to communicate in a way that's respectful. You got to communicate in a way that's you're not being a jerk. And you're not, like, trying to say, I know how this needs to go. But I think you need to, like, open people up to the possibility that there's other options. And so, I don't know, it's kind of something I don't really analyze too much, but I do know there's a certain way of communicating to people when it comes to delivering criticism that, it's a fine art.
Indeed. Are you a manager?
No, not yet. No.
Okay.
But that's, I'm sure that'll come up more when I go into that area eventually.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And I want to share with you this little thing that I found while I was looking at a job description for interaction designer at Google, as well as the mission at Google, which was beautiful. But there was this little mock-up of an interview of someone interviewing for the position. I think it was actually questions of a potential interaction designer asking questions to a Googler. And one of the questions was, what does it mean to be googly? And the person's response was, I mean, I'm curious, like, what you would say to that, but I can tell you what they said. Do you have an answer to what does it mean to be googly?
I'd like to see what their answer is. I'm curious.
Okay. Putting your ego aside.
Yeah, definitely.
That just sounds exactly like what you were saying.
Yeah, you kind of have to. I mean, if you want to do work that's, like, with a team, I mean, you can't be the rock star that's, like, coming in with a bunch of swagger. I mean, you can be.
I mean, you are, but
no.
You were.
Yeah. But not in the sense of
asshole rock star.
Yeah, like, just that sort of very egocentric kind of way of being. And it doesn't fly in a lot of places. It certainly doesn't fly on Team I'm on. I feel like everybody's very egoless. It's very refreshing, actually. It's probably one of the things I love most about working there is the people are really open-minded and nice and kind. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure in there. So yeah, I could agree with that. I think of googliness, I actually think of more, just being actually free enough and comfortable enough in your skin to be truthful with people and be truthful in how you really feel, how you really think, and how you really are. Not feeling bad that you're a freak. If you're a freaky kind of person, there's a lot of freaky people, at Google. I love that. I love that everyone's their own freak, and they accept themselves. I think that's the thing. I would think that's the thing I've noticed the most about people at Google. There's a lot of self-acceptance that I've noticed in people. That it seems like people are really comfortable in their own skin. And it really makes it a lot more fun to work. There's something about that when you, in any kind of endeavor, whether it's working on a team in technology or working on being in a band or any kind of like group effort. When people are comfortable in their own skin, that's when I think a lot of great stuff can happen. I don't know. I mean, other people might say something different where it's like when you have got a really strong leader and everyone's like lockstep in with their vision, that's another thing. Maybe that could also yield some creativity. Not much fun though. I wouldn't want to work there. I'm not going to name the company that I'm thinking of for that. But anyway.
What's so cool is that you are using such embodied language to be comfortable in one's own skin. Means to be a Googler.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because, and I feel like I'm emphasizing this particularly for younger listeners, like the youth in today's world, to remember that this is an incredible reality and tool to access the world's information, to use what is at our fingertips through Google, through the internet, through other means technologically, and to know when to let go, set it aside, go for a walk, and get comfortable with whatever's happening inside of here, in me,
Absolutely.
as you, so that by being able to be tolerant with the freakiness of being oneself, that we can then be tolerant the freakiness of all the other people around us.
Yes.
And
from self-acceptance comes acceptance of others.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think through that, if we could be a little more googly in the sense of self-acceptance, which I really like you relating it that way, because that makes me feel so nice about imagining plugging in and giving energy to that space, is like, okay, let's be comfortable with who we are. I can log in for that. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's tonic for
Well,
sure. Rose, thanks for thinking of me for this. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining us on Path and Purpose. Before you go, is there something you want to take with you? Perhaps a story that sparked a new thought or feeling for how you want to live closer to what matters most. Add your voice to the circle by leaving a note in the comments, and we hope you'll continue walking the path with us on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube for stories from future guests about making meaning in this emerging world. Until then, as Dad says, let's be safe and have fun.